Then we're going to go ahead and take the test. You have until 7:30 to complete your exam. It has to be done by then so I can grade them. And then come back to this room at 8 o'clock for the rest of class. By then I'll have graded your exams. You can see how well you did. But we're going to have lecture and quiz and all that stuff. So don't leave after the test because you just missed so much. Now, well, I don't say anything about that. Is everybody ready? Okay. So what is a social problem? Well, it has to be a pattern that infects the entire groups. Very often an existing condition could be redefined as a social problem. There has to be a focus on the situation because you couldn't explain a social problem by saying there's just a whole bunch of bad individuals. You could say somebody's poor because they're lazy. But when you have like a whole section of society that's poor, it's really hard to say that you got like a whole section of society that's lazy. Sociological perspectives. The functionalist perspective, again, looks at the function of things. But think about a social problem and how it fits in this model a little bit. We are most sensitive to what threatens us most, what we fear most. For instance, if it was not too far ago in the past, if you stole somebody's horse, that might put them at grave risk. Now if you stole somebody's horse, it's not really kind of that big a deal. So our greatest punishment is for crimes against our most cherished values. Conflict theory is going to look at, there's some contention over who's going to have the good life and who isn't. It comes from Marx and his idea about owners and laborers, these statuses, social conditions, and being in conflict with one another. The interactionist perspective is going to look at social problems in terms of group definition, how groups sort of say this is a problem together and create that meaning around some particular issue. Roles are behaviors, norms are rules. You got three things: statuses, positions; norms are rules; roles are behaviors, or expected behaviors. Labeling theory is connected directly to interactionist view. What it means in our context is what is deviant or not deviant is really defined by people's response to it, people's attitude towards it. Demographics look at numerical rates. An incidence in a population of something would be a demographic. Participant observation is when the researcher interacts directly with the population he or she is examining, kind of doing and learning at the same time. Social experiments are really hard to do, and even if you do one, it's probably going to bring up some ethical issues. What's the difference between conservative and liberal? Well, conservative would say, let's have less government. Liberal would say we need more government to handle the social problems that we have. Social problem stages, where you go from problem definition, the problem acquires some kind of legitimacy, then you typically have a reemergence of demands, a rejection of a response, the official response, and institution building. Definition, legitimacy, reemergence, institution. Americans in health. Well, we're sedentary, we eat fast food, we smoke cigarettes. Healthcare indicators. There's two good ways to tell how well your society is doing in terms of health. You look at things like life expectancy, how long you expect people to live, and infant mortality. Well, people live longer and fewer babies die, then you have a better system. Healthcare and competition. Well, the healthcare institution is not a competitive marketplace where you have supply and demand things going on. And the reason is because this competition is limited, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But one of the things it does, it makes the price higher. Special interests that we're talking about that do these things, that manipulate the healthcare system, the two primary culprits are doctors and insurance companies, as well as healthcare providers. Why do physicians cost so much? Well, the American Medical Association limits the number of doctors that can graduate. It's pretty smart. Doctors tend to specialize. That makes them more expensive. And, you know, insurance for malpractice is very expensive. These are all factors that increase healthcare. Okay. Medicare is for the elderly, you'll find out. And Medicaid is for the poor. AIDS transmission is primarily still through intercourse, but of course we know blood transfusions, sharing needles, using drugs, etc., but mostly through intercourse. Public versus private sector hospitals. Well, a private hospital can do what they want, right? So if you come there and they say, "Got money?" You say, "No." They say, "See ya." They're not supposed to, but they do. Public has to take everybody. So a private hospital will be less likely to treat somebody who's overdosed, less likely to treat somebody who's suicidal, less likely to treat somebody who has AIDS. Professional organizations limit the number of doctors. They limit the amount of external oversight. You know, doctors say they take care of doctors, but they restrict things like midwives. You know, there are a lot of medical things that we can do without a doctor. But the doctor, the AMA and other organizations are smart enough to keep the doctors in charge. Managed care means an HMO, Health Management Organization. Phobias are intense but irrational fears. Intense but irrational fears. This is something from DSM. How do we define abnormal? Well, we talk about a lot of different ways, but the bottom line is it's a social construction. A social construction. We sort of make it up together. The medical model of mental illness says that mental illness is a disease that has biological causes. DSM-4 is now DSM-5, but it's still DSM-4 in your text. It's not even DSM-4-TR. But we'll pretend like DSM-4 is really what we're talking about. The things that are referred to are the same. It's the Standard Manual of Mental Disorders. That's what DSM is. Actually, it stands for Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association. The kinds of things that affect how you be diagnosed, how you be treated, include things like sex or gender, residence, where you live, what neighborhood, what your ethnicity is. Remember we talked about mental illness and social class, how so many people that were mentally ill seem to be down on the bottom? Well, the question is did they get down on the bottom because they went there according to their mental illness? Or is there something about living down on the bottom that makes you crazy? Total institutions. Irving Goffman, the person who wrote the book Asylums, he was focusing mostly on mental hospitals, but any institution that controls pretty much all of your life would qualify as a total institution. By the way, I never told you how to get out of the crazy hospital once you got yourself put in. You've got to buy in. You've got to buy into the official interpretation. As long as you're telling them, no, you're wrong and I'm right, then you're gonna stay. Tolerated sex variance. There are some kinds of sexual behaviors that society might not love, but they'll say, ah, we'll let them have it. Certain things that heterosexuals do alone in the privacy of their bedrooms, mostly will get a pass. Incest is when you have sex between people who are closely related. The essence of an incest system is secrecy, though. That's what defines it. If other people know about it, then it's not gonna happen. You know, a lot of the incest that's between parent and child, father and daughter, is really more about power relationships, paternal dominance. Rape is an act of aggression. We think of it as sex, but it's not really sex, it's aggression that takes a sexual form. And typically the people who are rapists have self-image issues of their own. Paraphilic rapism is date rape. Homosexuality, well, if you think about what caused it, we know for sure that homosexuality can be situational in prison. The AIDS epidemic, well, the population impacted the most was the homosexual population. Prostitution is probably a social problem because it's outside legitimate family control and it's non-procreational sex. You usually go from promiscuity to exploration or some kind of transition period, and then you become a pro. Pornography in children. Well, pretty much everyone agrees that pornography and children don't go together. Everybody. Nobody says yes. Let's see what else. What do you think is the most likely treatment for a mental disorder?
Drugs.
That's half
Yeah,
right.
therapy.
Drugs and therapy, right? Psychotherapy will do that. Okay, probably not, huh? Yep. All right, let me say a few things before I pass out your test. You guys can take everything off.